All right, this video is going to be about clarifying some things that some of my other videos had, addressing some questions that some people had brought up in the comments, and basically a year in review kind of thing. It's been a really fun project, and I really have gotten a lot of joy from listening to some of the comments from people who've made comments on the videos. So let's start with the front view. Okay, so this is a 77. Initially, this one had a rubber bumper. The rubber bumper did not have the chrome grille like this. Chrome grille. This is aftermarket. It's not made by. It's not provided by Moss. I think actually the company who made these was out of California, and they've gone out of business, and we bought like the last one they had in stock. But it's really nice looking, and we're going with a chrome and black as opposed to chrome and chrome. So in this case, the grille has a nice honeycomb or crosshatch black, and that came out really well. The one of the videos I had in there was about replacing this front apron, and you see it came out real nice. The transition from the front fender to the apron, and the apron comes across without any seams or anything, and we didn't have to do any Bondo on it because it was a brand new piece, but sanded it, primed it, painted it. It came out really nice. The thing that I do need to mention on this and to cover is that there's a lot of people doing these chrome conversions, and the question is, how do you handle this frame part right here, and how do you get the grille to connect? So let me open the hood, and I'll show you what we did mechanically to make that work. So first of all, with the hood open, you can see we've got hydraulic struts now that replace the ones that the little clippy ones that come with the MG. But you can see down in here, these are just setting in place. And the original, this frame member came all the way up to the front, and this was cut in half. We cut this in half, piece of metal. And so you can see the welds here. What I did was I basically just cut a slit and then pushed it down and then welded it together so that it had a nice angle to that. You don't want to leave that open, because then as you're driving, water and whatnot will get down into the frame. So you need to close that off. I imagine I could have cut it all the way back here and just gone flat, but that looked kind of hideous, and this is a nice transition. You need to have this surface right here to be able to bolt in that piece right there. So when you're putting that in, you need to give yourself room. You set that in place. You can see how it slides right into that little slot. You need to have that space to put a nut or a machine screw in. So that needs to be. You need to have that space. So you don't want to cut too much. You need to keep the metal in there for structure. You need to close this down to keep water from getting in there. But all in all, I think that transition came out really well. You see a little bit better side view of how we cut the frame. Did down both sides, and that will give us a nice mounting surface for the putting those nuts and bolts in there. So the next thing you do when you do these chrome conversions is you have to deal with the rear bumper. On the rear bumper, the rubber bumper consumes this area right here, and so this part is rubber right here. So you have to weld in these little tail fin pieces and do some Bondo and body work to make a nice blend on that. And you can see that came out really nice. As soon as we get the bumpers in, we'll put those on, and so that brings up the next thing. So blinkers. So the rear the rubber bumpers had some really interesting blinker configurations, and in this case, you know, you need to be able to see when you're going to turn. Obviously, the people behind you are more interested in what you're doing. So we went with the standard configuration here in the rear. These are not 1977 taillights. These are taillights from a 69. They're a bit more sleek, and they're red instead of orange, which kind of matches my color scheme. So that's how I went with those. But in the front, back to the front again, we only left the front signal marker on the side. I should say the side signal markers. We only left the ones on the side. In the rubber bumper, there was a signal marker that split right here. It was half and half. And with the older models, they would put a signal marker right here. But it just was hideous. I didn't like the way it looked, and it just looked like it was just some more piece of thing just schlocked onto it. And so we decided not to put a signal marker in there. And if anybody gives us any hassle on that, I did find a headlight that has an LED signal marker in the bottom of the ring. I'll put a link to that if anybody's interested in doing that, because I think that really makes the lines nice and clean. You know, the light's going to be there, so if you just have it inside and integrated within the light bulb here, then you don't have to worry about that. But I don't think I'm going to do that initially, but that's my fallback position. But I think that looks a lot cleaner with only one signal marker there. One of my earlier videos, I talked about replacing the engine mounts and how you have to replace the steering shaft. In order to take the steering shaft out, you have to take the rack and pinion out. When we took the rack out, one of the things that we noticed was that the boots were completely deteriorated. Anytime you're working with these old classic cars, you always got to replace all the rubber and all the wiring. So I'm putting a new wiring harness in there. So that's a major component. The rack has a reservoir that holds oil in there, and this whole shaft is filled with oil. In the boots, they have oil in there, and so when they extend and retract, if you don't have good boots, all that oil will come out. And so one of the things that I showed in that video was taking these boots off. I got a little overspray on that rack, or on that tie rod. The tie rods have to come out, and you have to take them off of the pinion arms. And so anyway, how do you do that without having to completely do a realignment on the car? Well, I found a method where you can put the tie rod ends, you can put new boots on over the top of the tie rod end. You see that little tiny, you see that little tiny opening right there goes over the top of the tie rod end, and believe it or not, with a Ziploc sandwich bag and a little WD-40, you put a Ziploc over the top of the tie rod end and you squirt all kind of oil on it, and lo and behold, that little hole will slide right over the top of the tie rod end. So you don't have to disassemble your tie rods to replace the boot. It's really not that difficult. So if you're thinking about putting boots on and you're like, oh, I don't want to do another alignment on my car, well, it's really not all that hard. You can take the whole rack off and work with it as a unit, lube those babies up, slide them right over, and they go right on. I did another video on how to replace the ignition switch. You can see this is the new ignition switch. It's been put in place. When you get them brand new, they have a bolt head, but see this little thing on the stud where it gets really skinny? You're intended to break those off. Those bolt heads are intended to fail. So you tighten them up until they fail, or you cut them off, and it becomes a sort of a security thing, so nobody would steal your car and replace the key switch. It's supposed to make it difficult. I assume. I don't know why they would do that. But I'm gonna leave those bolt heads on there. If the housing will close on around them, I'm not going to break them off. But that was questions from a gentleman named Glenn Hill about how to take that off. And in his case, he didn't have the advantage of having the car all disassembled and the dashboard taken out. And I can totally see how working from here, even just trying to get a screwdriver in from this angle with this dash in the way, that would be very difficult. I'd highly recommend pulling the dash off if you're going to do that, just to preserve, just to give you some torque. You have to be able to get some torque on that, and without those bolt heads and just making grooves for a screwdriver, it would in fact be very difficult. So I had the advantage of having taken the dash off. Speaking of taking the dash off, American Patriot, I love your comments. You had commented on the windshield video that I needed to make sure to replace this little finisher that goes on here before you put the windshield on. There is, in fact, for the benefit of all those, this little piece is the piece that he's talking about. If you saw that video about, I'll put a link in the somewhere around here to his comment about putting this finisher back on. So there's a piece of piping that goes along here, and it grabs onto this this piece of vinyl right here, and it's like a finisher, and it goes through here. And the piping goes up underneath this hole right here. Well, the way this gets screwed in, it needs to be right here. That's where that goes. Now, oops, sorry. It needs to be right there. I don't know if you saw how I did that. So I really don't think that you need to have the windshield off, but it would make it a whole lot easier. I totally agree with that. But this baby goes in right there, like that. And you can see it is the top to the piping that goes along the door right here. There is no way with the windshield in place for you to put that top screw in. So I totally agree with you, American Patriot. That is something that I didn't know about, and thank you for your advice on that. The second screw is, you can see it back there. It's accessible when you take the dash off. So since we have the dash just kind of sitting in place, it's not bolted, I'm going to take advantage of that, and I'll be putting that screw in right there. I think that I can get to that screw by removing this piece of rubber right here. In my video, I talked about how to attach this, and you can see that's inside there is where the screw is, here, and then again down here is another little dent where the other screw is. I'm going to take this piece off. So if I take this piece of rubber off right here, I should be able to get access, and you can see the screw hole right there. But thank you very much for that comment, American Patriot. That is certainly something that I'm going to do, and it's going to be a little difficult, but thankfully now I know not to do that. So FYI, for all of those of you who have watched my windshield video, I'm going to put a comment back to this video. I highly recommend that if you have taken all these pieces off and you intend to replace this piece, replace that piece before you put the windshield back on, or at least before you have the dash back on, so that you have access to those two screw holes, because you won't be able to put them on without either taking the dash off or the windshield off. Thanks, great comment, thank you for that. So while I have this door open, let me go over some of the things that I ran into when I had put the side window back in. One thing to notice, when you put in that side window in, I don't know if you can see, it doesn't, the whole window doesn't ride into this felt groove. It's only like the last 30% of it rides in that groove. And so when it goes up and down, it doesn't really just go up and down, it goes back when you roll it up. It kind of goes backwards, and it slides in that bottom half. The other thing I want to comment on is this bracket. It's kind of counterintuitive to install the bracket in this orientation, and if you have this bracket so that this angle is facing the other direction, which is actually a bit more intuitive, it's wrong. And what that will do is it changes the geometry of this little felt slide just enough so that the window will fall out of the groove constantly. So definitely take note of the way that is oriented. That bracket, this bracket right here, needs to go with the nut here, and the angle has to go toward the back, so that, you know, when you bolt it in the hole right here, then everything fits in there. And once you do that, everything works great. Now, lubrication is kind of an important thing. You can see there's some white lithium grease that I put in there. The slide with the rollers on the bottom of the window here is the highest friction point. So make sure that you lubricate the piss out of that. And then when you're turning it, you'll be able to see that it moves a lot better. See, it kind of goes back and forth right in there. That is the highest friction point, is that slide right in there. So get some goo in there so that it can move on those wheels really well. The other thing that you need to lubricate is, here's a gear. I don't know if you can see it from this position. I guess it becomes visible from here. That little gear right there. You need to get some goo on there as well. Basically, you know, you can evaluate here. There's the slide on this end. I got some grease down in there. Not really catching it good with the video here. But that was one of the pitfalls, was this bracket. When I did a video on how to take out the window without destroying your door. I made note of the bolts. Make sure that you put the smaller bolts where they go. The smaller bolts are in this area right here, because you can see this bar right here. It slides right along the back side of those bolts, and so if you put the larger bolts in, they won't go in, and the window won't go up and down. The only other thing that you really have to worry about is this little retainer right here. This is a pin that limits how high the window goes up. So when you're installing the window, you have to have that pin out, because the window needs to be able to be free moving and everything. But once you get to where you're adjusting it, you have to put this pin back in to keep the window from going beyond the top. So those are the pitfalls I ran into with that, and I can attest that I have the passenger side installed incorrectly. Yeah, see how it seemed how I have got the angle back, facing forward. This is incorrect. Do not put that bracket facing this direction. It needs to go the other direction, like I showed you in the other one, because this window doesn't go up and down. It falls off the grooves. So I haven't finished doing this one yet. In closing, we're working on this project for a little more than a year. I was really surprised by that, looking back at my history. We did the dash during the winter time last year, but it's been a really fun project, and I think in the beginning of 2022 we're going to start working on the engine, and so you'll see a lot more mechanical oriented videos. The body work really came out really well. I think I'm really going to like this once we get the chrome bumper on there, the change between the rubber bumper and the chrome bumper. But I just wanted to do a quick video here just to answer, clarify some of the questions that people had, and give some praise for all those of you who did put comments on there. I really appreciate all the assistance that I found on the web and all the comments that everybody else made. So thank you very much for that. Happy New Year.